The French Grand Prix revealed race-defining strategy calls that ultimately, along with its drivers' speeds, won Red Bull the race and secured them a double podium. We can explore some of the various strategies at play during the race, including stint choices, pit stop calls, and tyre characteristics that allowed some drivers more success than others.
And now, the spoken word hip-hop from our sponsor. Yo, NordVPN if you want to stay protected, your well-being when you're browsing and connected. Thousands of their servers sitting all around the globe, so your network is in Chile while you're lazing in your bathrobe. Their connection is fast, so you needn't have to worry. You can stream from German Netflix from your two-bed flat in Surrey. Got lots of devices running at the same time? You can use 6 all at once, but I can't make this line rhyme. Use it from the office, use it from the cafe, use it from the ocean while you study hydrography. On a 2-year plan, or give you a special deal, a great big whopping discount. You would think it was a steal. Go to nordvpn.com/chainbear. I thought that you should know, and now you are aware. Thank you, NordVPN. And now we return to our Chainbear program already in progress.
It would be helpful if we once again simplify the lap of a track into a clock face like this, with 12 o'clock being the start-finish line that demarcates one lap from the next. At Paul Ricard, the lap times were roughly around the 100-second mark, so let's just take that as our model lap for this diagram. So the car goes around one lap of the circuit in 100 seconds. We can also say the pit stop delta time is around 24 seconds, which means that if a driver stops to take a pit stop, they will lose 24 seconds to the cars around them. So if driver A is 10 seconds ahead of driver B behind, if A stops, A loses 24 seconds to B, so we'll end up 14 seconds behind by the time they rejoin the track properly. You can visualise the pit stop delta as a ribbon of time behind the driver representing 24 seconds of the lap. If driver B is within this margin when driver A stops into the pits, B will end up ahead of A once A has made their stop. Of course, if B also has to make a stop, they will emerge behind A again if everything else remains consistent. So if both drivers have to stop, how does one use the pit stop phase to gain an advantage and possibly steal a place on the other? Let's start with the most common tactic, the undercut. With significant tyre degradation expected over their life, tyres tend to be slower at the end of their stint than they are at the beginning. Here we imagine a graph showing that with each progressive lap put onto the tyres, the lap times are getting longer and longer. The car is faster earlier on than it is later. Therefore, when you pit and put on fresh tyres, you can expect your lap times to drop as the new, unworn rubber gives you lots of lovely speed and grip. This can be true even if your new set of tyres is a compound or two harder than the ones you were just using. So if you're behind a rival, you could pit before them. And of course you are immediately out of their pit delta because your gap to them now is a whole pit stop plus the gap they already had on you. But if you can use the significant speed advantage on your fresh rubber to close the gap between you such that you bring yourself into this pit delta window by the time they stop, then you will emerge ahead of them by the time they are out of the pits. And this is undercutting, pitting first to utilise the fresh tyre advantage. Now less common in the Pirelli era but sometimes seen in F2 is the overcut. If tyres take a long time to warm up, they might actually be much slower in their first few laps while the driver is still bringing them up to temperature. Using the graph as before, we can see slower lap times early on and then the normal lap time curve once the tyres are heated and degrade in the usual way. So knowing this, you might want to try and pit after your rival. So imagine you're just behind your rival who makes their pit stop first. They'll emerge inside your pit stop delta obviously, so at this point they are still in the net lead, meaning if you pit now, they will still be ahead of you. But if you can use the speed advantage of your warmed in tyres against the slowness of their cold tyres, you could open this gap between you so they move out of your pit stop delta margin, so you can now take your pit stop and emerge ahead. Of course, now they have a significant tyre advantage over you, so you will need to defend against them on your cold tyres, so this isn't without a risk. But on many circuits, track position is key. It is often more difficult to pass on track than it is to put in a series of fast laps when you are separated from your rival through the pit stop phase and when you have a bit of free air. In F1, the undercut can be very powerful. So powerful in fact that it will override your optimum strategy in many cases. If your nearest rival pits and fresh tyres carry a significant advantage, you must respond, rather than try and stick to the ideal tyre strategy inherent to the Pirelli compounds. If one driver tries to undercut you, they could well be faster for every single lap that you don't pit and make you lose track position. So you need to swap out your tyres even if you know you've got to nurse the next set for longer than you wanted. In the French Grand Prix, Bottas pitted earlier than was ideal and earlier than anyone really expected to, due to the vibrations he was experiencing in the tyres. He came in on lap 17 when the state of play had Hamilton out in front, Verstappen 3 seconds behind, and Bottas a further 2.5 seconds behind him. This triggered a response from Verstappen on the very next lap, and while he didn't lose a position, Bottas had already closed about 1.4 seconds on him, proving the power of the undercut. Now Hamilton, instead of pitting straight after Bottas, went 1 lap longer than Verstappen, and over the course of 1 lap, a 24.5 second advantage turned into a 0.3 second disadvantage. Verstappen had taken the net lead of the race from him. This so obviously proved the advantage of the undercut that Hamilton actually tells his engineer on the radio, let's make sure we get the undercut on them at the next stops. Now, of course, what actually happened is Red Bull then caught Merc out by pitting way earlier than expected for their second stop. Verstappen ran his hards for just 14 laps before switching back to the mediums again for a long final stint. This put Hamilton between a rock and a hard place. If he pitted now, he would still be behind Verstappen and then would have to overtake on track, something that had already proved particularly hard to do on this circuit with their similar machinery. Alternatively, he could stay out and try and make his existing set of tyres work for the duration of the Grand Prix. The hards were projected to degrade over their lifespan to the extent that taking a 24-second hit for that extra pit stop and swapping to mediums was the faster option. Here we can see the two competing options. Hamilton stayed out on hards with the slower, longer laps, and Verstappen switched to the mediums. Every single lap, Verstappen was making up this much time over Hamilton. But crucially, Hamilton wouldn't have to give up track position if he stayed out. And if by good fortune and skill he could keep some fighting life in his hards, then maybe he could hold off Verstappen by the time the Red Bull closed the gap. Now ultimately this wasn't the case and Verstappen passed him easily in the closing laps. But it was really the only option left to Mercedes once Red Bull got the jump on them. Meanwhile, there was Perez. At the point Bottas made his first stop way back on lap 17, Perez was 10 seconds back from Hamilton and nearly 5 seconds back from Bottas. So not really involved in the fight for position at the front at this point, and he didn't have to respond to all these undercuts being triggered. Instead, Perez was able to run the more ideal tyre strategy I mentioned earlier. He took the Pirelli mediums he started on to lap 24 before switching to the hards. This means he was running hard tyres that were a full 7 laps younger than Bottas's, and so he was able to close that 5-second gap into a pass for third by the close of the race, with Bottas ruining that the team didn't put him onto 2-stop. Perez was the ideal rear gunner, a great number 2, a fine wingman, a goose, a falco. Red Bull were able to split their strategy between Perez and Verstappen and be ready for all possibilities. Bottas had to worry about Verstappen ahead and Perez behind, flanked by both Red Bulls and unable to really come into play to help Hamilton. If one team has 2 drivers fighting against a team with just 1 driver in contention, they are able to use both their drivers to outflank their rival strategically. And it generally reduces the strategic options of the team with just 1 car, as the 2-car team can always cover their rival with their second car, leaving their leading car free to race the race they want. This is why the talk of Red Bull's second driver has been so heated for years. The team has felt their second car isn't able to get amongst the Mercedes and give them a hard time, that Verstappen has been having to fight both of them without a rear gunner to cover one of the Mercedes. And after a couple of races to get himself together, Perez has now been able to both pick up a victory when Max was out of contention and steal a podium from Mercedes by outflanking them on strategy and pace. And Red Bull's second car might be one of the decisive factors in the team taking the 2021 title. We shall see.